Cleaning multiple fiber fabrics can be one of the most challenging tasks professional cleaners face. Today, we will discuss the types of blends you may find on the job and a few tips on cleaning them, considering products, procedures, and processes. And to do this, I'm pleased to welcome Tim Damroth. He's an IICRC certified technician and an expert when it comes to these tough challenges that maybe you don't want to see on the job, but you're going to see on the job. Is that right, Tim?
I see a lot of it, so it's good to be prepared.
All right. So we're going to talk about a couple of pictures. We'll put those up in a while, but to begin with, Tim, let's start with, when you walk into a job, obviously you need to know what you're cleaning. Could you share some of your best practices when it comes to identifying these fibers? And we're not talking about just nylon or just wool. We're talking about blends. Can you get into that?
With area rugs, I always look for the tag. And in my experience, the tag is not always right, but it is a good indicator. And normally I reach out to the designer if I can before I go to the job, especially if I've been contacted by them, to find out exactly what the content is. That way I have a good idea. And there are cases when I walk into a job blind, and I don't have that information. So one of the things that some of my IICRC teachers have taught me is to carry a pocket microscope so that I can analyze things at 600x visually on my iPhone to see the shape and structure of the fiber and if they are consistent with the literature about them in structure.
Do you do like the traditional burn test at times? Does that help with this? Or since it's
I
a
do.
blend?
I do always, I always start with the burn test.
Okay.
Although I know that there are blended fibers. Sometimes you see cotton and jute that are twisted together or wool and nylon that are made in such a way that it's hard to, get tweezers and figure out which is which. That's where the microscope really comes in
Okay.
handy. The burn test, just to double check my work, make sure that I'm right about it. And but with certain things like sisal and jute, it's a little bit harder to differentiate, or aloe or hemp or these other fibers we see more often these days.
We're going to talk about some of those in a minute, but that's good information. I see your point. If they're blended together and you do your burn test, you've got all kinds of different indicators there that you have to figure out. So I like the microscope idea. And through the phone, that must really show a nice picture.
It's incredible. It's changed my entire business just in 6 months since one of my teachers really encouraged me to start using it. It's the first thing I do when I go into a job, whether it's a blended carpet or
Hmm.
furniture, anything. I always go to the microscope, and then it allows me to take pictures on the iPhone, so I have them for my records.
Very cool. Let's talk about some of the essential tools and products you need. So obviously, when you go to a job, you've got your truck, you've got your cleaning machine, you've got, some basic tools. Anything specific that you use for these fine fabrics, especially considering the blends?
Yeah, so I've been using blacklight for about a year and a half now to find stains that may not be visible to the naked eye. But I've also noticed when using it that certain fibers fluoresce, whereas others don't. So it's very easy to give your item a simple sweep with the blacklight and see if, for instance, um, one piece of the weft is silk or cotton, because cotton will always fluoresce. One of the ways that I found that out was by sticking it on my shoes. I could see that the laces and the stitching on my shoes fluoresced, and none of the other stuff did. So it's not out there. You can't Google that, but it's something that I found and is absolutely 100% foolproof. I always carry a pipette with me because most of what I clean is so fine. That whether it's a reducer I'm going to be using, a dry solvent, or a pH of any a varying uh, power, I always take the pipette and put a drop on the stain to see how the fiber will respond to it. And then, of course, blot it off right away. This is also a great way to know if there's been a fluorocarbon treatment or Scotch guarding on the
Mm.
carpet, before I start cleaning. So I know that the absorbency rate of the fabric or the fibers that I'm cleaning is that, because otherwise, if it's been treated, then obviously it brings it down to about zero. So it poses even more challenges to spot cleaning. Um, and I have a comprehensive fiber ID uh, kit that I carry around with tweezers and razor blades and scissors. These are all things that I've hand chosen over the years, um, to be the least invasive, because the last thing I want to do is snip a fiber off of a carpet and have it start unraveling when I vacuum, or off the inside of a cushion, and have the client see it and come over and ask me, well, why are you cutting a piece of my fabric off, sir? Which has happened a few times. So I always go for the smallest piece with the tweezers and burn it, and then have to use my nose and smell it. Everybody sees color differently. So when we look at the color of the flame, it can be a little bit difficult to decipher for some people versus others, whether it's green or dark yellow or, this kind of thing.
Okay, very good. Let's talk about some of these pictures you sent me. Can you run through just a couple tips and what you experienced with these? The first is a wool cotton jute Axminster.
This carpet actually is from a client that has had it for 20 years, and they've replaced it every few years with the same exact carpet. It has been problematic for me because I was unqualified to clean it when I first met the client. Um, when I took my the CCT course, I realized that I was unqualified. I paid close attention and I realized what I'd been doing wrong. So the big challenge with this carpet is that any drop of water, and this is in a kitchen on a runner, makes a gray spot.
Hmm.
And I always thought that I could use a reducer, Haitian cotton, something like that to, really try to get it out or get it back to its original um, uh, look. And what I realized when I brought the microscope to the job is that those gray spots under 600X are actually yellow. And it's cellulosic browning happening instantaneously because the fibers themselves are minimally processed. And so you can't just go ahead and put a little browning treatment or Haitian cotton on it and hope for the best. You actually have to get a little more sophisticated. And that's where my teacher, Tom Cermak, taught me about isolating the spot with a box and a hole in it after I put the reducer on, and then using the black light of choice to enhance the chemical activity of the product. So not every stain is the same, especially when you get into a 4 or 5, fibers. And it might just be one of the fibers that has the cellulosic browning, or, the alkaline browning, whatever it is. And so it's been a real learning curve for me. Also, on this particular carpet, the more saturation, the more likely it is the jute on the back will get wet and then start wicking. And it's the same problem. It leads to gray spots on the top that are just, it doesn't matter what you clean it with, they're not going away. So you have to really utilize and understand UV sun fading or blacklight fading.
All right, I like it. Let's look at the next one. Wool, cotton, aloe, and jute. I know aloe is used on sunburns. What's going on here, Tim?
So I've seen a lot of aloe and hemp in the last 15 years, kind of sneaking their way into the high-end manufacturing process. And this particular carpet was brand new when I got called out, and it had literally, like the Axminster, only had a water spot. And I took the microscope and looked at the gray spot, and again, sure enough, it was yellow. So I knew that the old adage of clean the whole rug and you might see the stain disappear is absolute folklore, 100% folklore. And that's something that I am proud to say, because I've learned that the hard way over the years. And this was one job where I could use the UV, with some browning treatment and get it back to its original luster. Um, you just, when you go in and you do the fiber ID, it's less important whether you're looking at hemp or aloe or jute than it is about the outcome of the job. And so I tend to look at plant fibers like that in the same way, and just be the least aggressive for the best outcome. As soon as I start getting ahead of myself, there's pilling, there's shedding, there's all kinds of problems that happen. And, we all don't, we all want happy customers. We don't want to go home and, you know, have not been successful. So,
Agreed. Our third one is a wool silk Nepali rug. This looks expensive. You don't have this in your living room now, do you?
No, actually, I'm glad I don't. I would love it, but my client spilled a large cup of coffee on it, and it was on the silk part, the higher part of the pattern.
Hmm.
And they were just distraught that it was never going to come out. So I looked and I found the tag, and then I did my fiber ID burn test and the microscope just to make sure that the structure of the fibers were consistent with the literature. And then I began with just the stain, and I always start in the middle of the stain and work my way out. Sometimes I'll even use blue painter's tape and just put it along the outer edges of the stain so I don't forget where where I am when I'm cleaning, because it's very often the pattern of the carpet or whatever can sort of be disorienting, especially this one. So luckily I was successful on that one. I had to get a bit inventive. I had to go a bit outside of the IICRC recommendations for chemistry, and use something that I knew would work. And I was able to get the spot out. And I just would say very briefly that you have to be very careful with isopropyl alcohol because of dye. But coffee is actually soluble in isopropyl alcohol. So that was
Okay.
what I found out on this job.
Good work. You're thinking, Tim. You're thinking your way through these. That's what we want to take away from this. The last one, I'm going to butcher this word. Silk Vasaski brand carpet. Did I say it right?
You did,
I
yes.
did. All right. What is this, Tim?
The company or the rug?
Both. Just talk about the rug and maybe where that word comes from.
Okay. So the rug is in a client of mine's home. He has wall-to-wall Visovsky throughout most of the house, and it's finicky stuff because it's very fine. It's about the three times as thick as a piece of upholstery fabric. I mean, it's you could put a hole in it while you're walking on it. So when you spray it with any water-based product, it turns brown like linen. So I always have cleaned with the barrier method, with the dry solvent first, and then addressed the spots with the wet method to minimize any overall change in the look. Now, Visovsky's been around a long time. I'm not sure exactly how long, but I do know that they patented their needle, at least the original owner did, for production. And they are extremely expensive. So it's important to, if you're going to get into high-end cleaning, to know about Visovsky, because when you walk into a home and you see one, if you know, then you absolutely are certain that's what it is. You don't even need to see a tag. They're copyrighted. They only make about 8 carpets per year because they're so expensive, and at their facilities down in Puerto Rico. For many, many years, they were in the Oval Office, and presidents would have their carpets custom made for them. I believe at some point ownership of the company changed hands, but the name still remains. It's the gold standard. It's like the Rolls-Royce of carpet.
Well, Tim, that was a nice little tour of 4 rugs. I guess the last one there was just a single fiber silk.
Oh, no, that's a wool silk, 50-50 blend.
Oh, that
Uh,
one is a wool silk. Okay.
yeah. And it's made on monk's cloth, which again, some of my IICRC teachers were able to help me identify. I never knew that. I cleaned them for 18 years prior to learning that. So there's cotton in there too,
But
which means they're very finicky
but that brand, you say they make about 8 a year.
at the most. Yeah.
That's
But
incredible. That's
Some
incredible.
are just area rugs, and they're all handmade.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in a world of commerce today, to limit how many you're making to that number is impressive to me. So yeah, not everyone's going to find that rug because of that.
I've met very few people that have even heard of them,
Yeah.
but they're out there, and a lot of folks have cleaned them and didn't know that that's what it was. So what I always tell my colleagues is you have to know the risk. If you don't know the value or the approximate value of what you're cleaning, you probably have no business doing it.
Hmm.
That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah. Well, Tim, we're about out of time, but I have one more point I want to close with, and that's you talked about identification, you talked about processes, procedures, knowing what you're cleaning, you talked about thinking about what you're doing and controlling the situation. Let's talk about the customer. when you go into these jobs and they know what they spent on these rugs, these pieces, and it's a lot of money. What do you do to discuss with them what you're going to do, the before, the after, to set the job up and make sure they're on board with what you're doing and they're happy when you're done? Can you talk about that?
Well, I'm sure not everyone's going to agree with what I'm about to say, but I'm somebody who cleans almost entirely natural fibers. And I had a realization many years ago that if I was wearing natural fibers on my body, my garments, that I would be treated differently. If I show up in a polyester polo shirt and, sneakers from the tennis court, I'll be treated like a carpet cleaner. I mean, that's how we all we need to get sweaty and do our job. But when you're highly referred or referred from a showroom and in another state or place, it's important to present yourself well and also have the ability to convey the risks of cleaning these fibers to the client and do so in a professional manner. And so aside from what I bring and what I do when I get there, I always show up looking the part. Now, that doesn't mean I have to spend a lot of money on my clothes. It just means that, if you want to learn how to clean natural fibers, put them on. Um, Normally, what I tell my colleagues is never discount any method. Don't be a method snob. Because there's a lot of people that say, oh, VLM or host, they don't work. And that's true if you're cleaning a bowling alley. But if you're going in to clean something that's literally just a bit dusty or hasn't been used much or, just needs to freshen up, VLM, terry towel cleaning, host, dry compound, they all have their place. And so the difference I find between me and my colleagues is that in my uh, vehicle, I have many different apparatuses from an extractor to a buffer, whether it's OP or, like an Oric machine, or I have all types of different ways of cleaning something, all the way down to just a towel with my hand. And the last thing that I will not leave my house without is a fan. Because as soon as I get something wet, it needs to be drying immediately. Otherwise, I'm asking for trouble, big trouble. In the realm of browning and shrinking and color bleed and all these different things.
Well, Tim, appreciate your tips today. Those watching, no doubt, will perhaps not end up with the rug they've cleaned in their own home that they had to buy by listening to what you have gone through and what you've shared.